Imagine this, an apple falls from a tree, and in that moment, one of the greatest minds in history, Isaac Newton, redefines the way we understand the universe. What if I told you his breakthrough wasn't the result of intense work, but rather boredom? Could embracing boredom spark your next great idea? In 1665, Isaac Newton, like much of the world at the time, was facing a crisis. The bubonic plague was sweeping across Europe, forcing universities and public spaces to shut down. Newton, a young student at Cambridge, retreated to the quiet countryside of Woolsthorpe Manor. It was there, in isolation, that he experienced one of the most productive periods of his life, an era we now call his Annus Mirabilis, or Year of Wonders. But this wasn't because Newton was actively seeking inspiration. In fact, quite the opposite. Without his usual academic routine or distractions, he found himself daydreaming, staring out of the window. It was during one of these moments that the famous apple fell, leading him to ponder why objects always fall down and not sideways, or in any other direction. This seemingly mundane observation, paired with hours of idle thinking, laid the groundwork for his theory of gravity, a theory that would change the course of science forever. The irony is, Newton wasn't in the middle of a rigorous experiment when his ideas crystallized. He wasn't toiling away in a lab. He was, by all accounts, bored. And therein lies an important lesson for us today. Boredom is not the enemy of creativity. In fact, it may be the key to unlocking it. Fast forward to today. How many of us can say we allow ourselves to get bored? We live in a world of constant distractions. At the first sign of boredom, what do? We reach for our phones, scrolling endlessly through social media, checking emails, or watching videos. We fill every spare second with something, anything, to avoid that uncomfortable feeling of doing nothing. But what if I told you that this constant need for stimulation is actually stifling your creativity? Research suggests that when our minds are constantly occupied, we lose the ability to think deeply, to reflect, and to come up with original ideas. It's during moments of mental rest, when we allow ourselves to daydream, that our brains are free to make unexpected connections, to solve problems in ways we hadn't considered before. One study conducted by the University of Central Lancashire asked participants to perform a boring task, copying numbers from a phone book for 15 minutes. Afterward, those participants were asked to come up with as many uses as possible for two everyday objects. The results? Those who had been bored by copying numbers were far more creative in their responses than those who hadn't. This study, along with others like it, suggests that boredom gives our brains the space they need to be creative. When we're bored, our minds start to wander. We think about things from different angles, we reflect on our experiences, and we start to connect the dots in ways we might not have if we were constantly stimulated by external inputs. Now, let's dig a little deeper into what's happening in the brain during boredom. Neuroscientists have identified what's called the default mode network, DMN, a network of brain regions that becomes active when we're not focused on a specific task. The DMN is responsible for internal thoughts, things like daydreaming, recalling memories, and imagining the future. It's during these moments of mental idling that some of our most creative thoughts occur. Think about the last time you had a truly original idea. Were you actively trying to come up with it? Or did it pop into your head while you were in the shower, or taking a walk, or maybe even lying in bed? That's the DMN at work. Your brain's way of connecting unrelated ideas when you're not consciously thinking about them. And this isn't just speculation. There's solid evidence to back it up. A study from Harvard University showed that people who allow their minds to wander during a boring task are more likely to generate creative solutions to problems afterward. The researchers found that when participants let their minds drift, they engaged in something called autobiographical planning, which is essentially the process of thinking about personal goals, and how to achieve them. In other words, boredom isn't just a state of mind, it's a gateway to deep thinking and problem solving. But here's the catch. In today's world, we rarely let ourselves experience boredom. We have a constant stream of entertainment and distractions at our fingertips. The average person spends over 3 hours a day on their phone, constantly refreshing, tapping, and scrolling. In fact, research from the University of California, Irvine, found that we switch between tasks or check our devices about every 3 minutes. This constant toggling between distractions means that our brains never get the chance to enter that deep, reflective state where creativity thrives. Let's pause and think about that. If we're constantly filling our time with quick fixes, checking social media, binge watching shows, playing games, when are we allowing ourselves to really think, to get bored, to let our minds wander and come up with those big, life-changing ideas? It's not just anecdotal. Another fascinating study by Dr. Sandy Mann, a psychologist and boredom researcher, yes, that's a real job, found that people who engage in repetitive, boring tasks are actually more creative afterward. She suggests that boredom encourages daydreaming, which in turn leads to creative problem solving. Here's another example. J.K. Rowling, the author of the Harry Potter series, famously said the idea for her books came to her during a long, boring train ride. She was staring out of the window, her mind wandering, when the character of Harry Potter suddenly popped into her head. Had she been distracted by a smartphone or a tablet, would she have had that breakthrough? Who knows? But it's safe to say that boredom played a role in sparking her creativity. And it's not just writers and scientists who benefit from boredom. Entrepreneurs, too, have embraced this idea. Jeff Bezos, the founder of Amazon, has spoken about how important it is to create space for boredom and unstructured time. He argues that some of the best ideas come from allowing yourself to step back, think, and reflect, rather than constantly pushing for productivity. So, how do we embrace boredom in our own lives? The answer isn't to eliminate all distractions completely. That's neither realistic nor practical in today's world. Instead, it's about creating intentional moments of boredom. This could be as simple as putting your phone away during your commute, going for a walk without headphones, or setting aside time each day to just sit and think. In fact, some of the world's most successful people make time for this. Bill Gates, for example, takes what he calls think weeks, where he retreats to a secluded cabin to do nothing but read, think, and reflect. It's during these periods of deep thought that he's come up with some of his biggest ideas for Microsoft. Another way to embrace boredom is through activities that don't require much mental effort, like knitting, gardening, or even washing dishes. These tasks may seem mundane, but they allow your mind to wander, giving your brain the freedom to make those creative connections. Finally, consider setting boundaries around your technology use. Designate no phone zones or specific times when you'll disconnect from screens and give yourself the chance to be bored. It might feel uncomfortable at first, but over time, you'll start to notice the benefits, more creative ideas, deeper problem solving, and a greater sense of mental clarity. In a world that's constantly demanding our attention, boredom might just be the secret ingredient to unlocking our full potential. So, next time you feel that itch to reach for your phone, resist the urge. Let your mind wander, embrace the boredom, and see where it takes you. Who knows? You might just discover your next big idea.